Thanks for joining us, Tori.
It's great to be here. Great to be here.
Yeah, for those who have not heard of your infamous name, would you like to just, I guess, give a little bit of a background on...
Yeah. So, I don't know why So let me give a background. So I work for Consensys, the warhorse of Ethereum. We've been plodding on for a few years now, and with the largest design studio in the world when it comes to blockchain. I lead the US government practice. So I'm down in Washington, D.C., and we're really focused on the public sector and encouraging adoption by the US public sector.
So, okay. And you... So is it just U.S. public sector? I had a question on that because I know I've heard you talk before. I know Consensys has worked with the government of Dubai and several other ones.
So pretty much the way we've done this is to be able to run this by specific geographies. So we're a big company and we're global, and people that say have experience with the French or the UK or European public sectors don't necessarily have that, that experience really doesn't translate to the US sector or to other places. So we're really focused on the federal government and then state and local government.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, I think I actually met you. I don't know if you remember. I met you at a few events beforehand, when you were working at Booz.
That's right.
So that was, what were you doing there?
So Booz Allen, I was leading up their blockchain investment and then working in the analytics space. So, I've been at Booz for about 7 years. I've been trying to sort of persuade them to invest more in blockchain. Unfortunately, they weren't ready for that. So eventually I met Joe at a few dinners. We talked. We tried to do some business together when I was at Booz. That didn't work out. And from that, we ended up, in the end, me coming over there.
What is that? How does those conversations, generally speaking, go when you're getting that pushback? What kind of things were they pushing back on?
They were pushing back on essentially the market isn't ready. This is a great idea, but its time hasn't come yet. And especially when it comes to government, it's simply too conservative for us to be able, the government is too conservative for us to mark this push. And that's what we're finding a lot when it comes to dealing with established firms in the government space and trying to get them to invest in blockchain. They just don't see the immediate value to it. They say, we're seeing some things come out of the government, but we're not really seeing enough. We don't think it's ready yet.
Sure. And then obviously you guys are Consensys Government, which is a big name. So there's obviously a market there, I'm guessing.
Right. That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, so how do you have a job? What is there that you can do with governments, given that most of their opinions might be so conservative?
Sure. So what we're seeing right now within the US federal government is quite a bit of, the fact it keeps freezing keeps fooling me. What we're seeing is a lot of enthusiasm coming from mid-level managers who are really committed to this technology. So we're seeing initiatives coming out of Health and Human Services, federal, the Food and Drug Administration, the Treasury. We're seeing a lot of things starting to come out of the Department of Defense and the different services. So we're seeing a great deal of enthusiasm starting. Now, are those the multi-million-dollar procurements that the big contractors like? No. Are they interesting, sort of small POCs beginning to work into things? That's kind of where we are now. And that's when we see that at Consensys, we want to be the pioneers for Web3 for the next generation. And so we wanted to get into the government now when people are starting to form their thoughts of how this will work and how, cyber or crypto government can really be enacted in this country.
Sure.
Well, I think introduce the whole Web3 thing for our listeners a little bit.
Sure. So if you think about it, the web's gone through for 3 generations. Web 1, thinking back to the 1990s, we've got static web pages, wall gardens, think AOL, when AOL was a big deal, when eBay first come along. Essentially, this is very much a one-way thing where you have a static web page that you can interact only with it in sending it information. Then we move to Web 2, which is kind of the age that we've been in now, where we have a lot of peer-to-peer contact coming through. What we don't have yet is what we think Web 3 will be. And one of the key characteristics of Web 3 is going to be this decentralized nature where you're really controlling your data. And when you're in a position to be able to step forward and take decisions about what happens to your data. My colleague John Walpert calls this the stateful internet. The whole idea that originally when you went onto the web, you had to submit your information every time you went onto the web because it was stateless. It didn't know who you were or where you came from. Then as Web 2 moved along, you could start to put cookies in there. And that was great because now when I went to a website, the website knew me, I could start to interact with it in a meaningful way. Unfortunately, what this does is create a whole bunch of data vacuums, of hoses to suck up that data. Data brokering, data capture becomes the main way of creating value on the web. Advertising becomes critical, and you've lost control of your data. Now, what Web 3 is going to do is put that control back into the hands of the user of the web. They now control their data, which is creating a new model for value generation on the web, and is also creating a new step towards greater security, because we're not going back to those big centralized honeypots that we've always seen before. So that Web 3 thing is something that, we see the future emerging. Now, from the point of view of government,
I was going to say, that sounds really interesting or enticing from like the point of view of me or just like the end user. Because like we're getting all that, we're getting control of our data. What's from the perspective of government, like you were going to, or the perspective of those honeypots, like, are they pushing back against that? Like, what's in it for them to move towards?
Actually, government isn't. And I think there's a number of reasons. The first reason is, from a jobs and competitiveness point of view. Like when I talk to congressional staff and congressmen and these policymakers, one of the things I hit on is, look, the US won Web 1 and Web 2, right? We got the biggest internet companies in the world. We added trillions of dollars of value, millions of jobs. And if you go to Europe now and you talk to people in this industry, they will very much say, we lost Web 1 and Web 2, and we're not going to do that with Web 3. We're going to be the people who are dictating it. And you go to China, you look at what Xi Jinping is saying. They are saying too, we're going to win Web 3. Web 3 is going to be designed on our terms. Now, when you come to that, you're starting to get to the point where the US is losing control of what is going to be the predominant way that you communicate and transact around the world. And that's something that really bothers policymakers. Now, they're in favor of free exchange of information, of all these great American values. They're also wanting to make sure that the businesses that come out of that are in the US and they're generating jobs in the US. So from a policymaker's point of view, there's a lot to think about that.
It's like adapt or die kind of thing.
Exactly. And secondly, when it comes to individual government agencies, there are many specific characteristics of Web3 that they're very interested in. For instance, there are literally trillions of dollars of unreconciled federal spending that's going on here. So one agency sends money to another agency for an interagency agreement. That is not reconciled, and it could go unreconciled for months and months and years and years. I think it used to be $2.1 trillion of unreconciled federal payments, which is a lot of money, but it's down from 6 trillion. So that's good news. Now, if you could track that straight from the congressional budget down and see where all that money went, that would be a huge improvement in accountability. It would stop people getting yelled at by congressmen, and it would stop people getting yelled at by their bosses. Plus, they spend billions of dollars. We have no idea how much. I've tried to get good estimates on this, and you really can't get estimates on it, of how much time is spent reconciling those. So, you know, just as an internal system, if we could have that government chain, that gov chain, just say working in the government, where you could reconcile those ledgers, you can save huge amounts of time and energy. You know, another thing that...
It sounds like that would bring a ton of clarity to the sort of argument or the debate between big government and small government, and is you know, in the efficiency of that. You know, one's defending it, and the other people just say it's you know, it's a ton of fat, trim it. If you have some clarity about,
Sure.
you know, then it's undeniable. Okay, this is, you know, wasteful.
Yeah.
Because the data would speak for itself.
Yeah, and you could see that transmission rate right from the budget that's passed, who it went to, who it touched, all that way down. And that would be great. You know, people could make decisions. You can see where there are blocks and holdups within the system. That's just one of sort of the big use cases, but people in government get that. I mean, the Treasury's use case was simply to track cell phones. And they were saying they spend about half an FTE a year, a full-time equivalent, half of someone's job, figuring out where the cell phones they give to senior decision makers go. You know, people lose them.
Sure.
They go to places they shouldn't go. All of this kind of stuff. They deny they ever got them, and all of this. Now, a cell phone is a unique item because it's part digital, part analog. It's part in the real world and part in the digital world. So they just went down and said, we're going to put the cell phones that we give.
Man, I'm just
Oh
waiting.
man, cliffhanger.
Yeah.
What happened to those cell phones?
All right.
Am I back?
You're back.
Oh, you're back.
Oh, there you went. And that's what happened to the cell phones. No.
Oh.
No, I mean, what, you know, they basically found innocent reasons why, but you have this thing of people denying it. They saved half an FTE, right?
Awesome.
Half a person's job wasn't spent managing the spreadsheet, getting on the phone with someone and arguing whether they received the cell phone.
Well, so, you know, to
Success.
yeah, like whenever I was at this, so I used to work at the CFTC, and whenever we were there, you know, one of the senior officials said, like, well, oh, you know, blockchain looks great. Can we take this weekly report we put out to the public and we'll just, you know, put it on the public blockchain, and this is going to be great. And this was his, you know, ideal use case, and he thought it would have been this awesome thing. But obviously, like, that doesn't necessarily make sense to put on the blockchain.
Exactly. And you hear so many stupid blockchain ideas.
Right. You know, like how, well, I guess what percentage, I mean, talking to you, would you see in the government? Like, do people come to you like with just the worst ideas ever?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, we see sort of three levels of blockchain, you know, interest. One is someone coming to us and saying, so I want to hear about this Bitcoin because of smuggling, because of, you know, money laundering and on all of this. And that's the most frustrating kind of communication. The second one that we get is a blockchain enthusiast. They've read the books, they've gone to a few conferences, and what they want to do is put their existing processes onto the blockchain, as you were just saying, whether they make any sense or not.
Yep.
This is my thing of dogs on the blockchain. I want to put my dog onto the blockchain. Why? Because puppy chain sounds really cool.
I'm sold. When's the ICO?
Isn't that Doge?
yeah, we have that already.
Well, it's funny. I said that to someone, and they said, that could really work with dog breeders because they're really interested in, and then maybe you could also do it with showing no puppy mills and stuff. I said, man, you sold me. Shut up and take my money. So you get all kinds of people who have some enthusiasm, and you don't want to put them away. But they'll come on, and the idea we frequently do is to say, let's work with you. Let's try and find a good use case. Let's try and find something that really does that. Occasionally, you get people who will come, and they will really have that sort of crypto view of things, where they want to move through and start to talk about tokenizing and some of the native currency things that are available on Ethereum. And that gets interesting. Some logistics folks came to us for a large public agency that moves things around the world. And they said, we're getting a lot of contraband in some of our shipments. And those things, and that frequently is fentanyl. And then we get dragged up in front of Congress and asked to explain why this contraband is coming in. And we said, well, why don't you try and think about, rather than just putting it on the blockchain, because that's not going to help you. You're going to know something went from A to B to C to D, but that's not that. Why don't you do something like putting on a crypto form of insurance on that logistics tail? So you could say each party that enters it, who's a non-US government party, has to put up a bond in crypto. And then if any party along the supply chain identifies contraband, they get all of the crypto bonds that was placed on the chain from the stages prior to that. So if you have three parties of the chain, A, B, and C finds contraband, then they get the crypto that A and B had to buy. Now, that's unfair, people say to A, who might say, well, hold on, I did nothing wrong, it was B. At which point you say, well, now you got an incentive to make sure that B doesn't get into the chain.
Right.
It creates a self-policing chain. Now, that's an interesting idea. No, they didn't go for it, but at least they worked around it. They thought about it. And you very rarely get people there. Government isn't at the sort of tokenizing and how I can use crypto yet.
Yeah, I guess that was sort of the next question I had. So especially with this whole, public Web3, so everything might be on like a public blockchain eventually. What's the relationship between sort of blockchain success ultimately and then cryptocurrency success? Because that sort of seems to be the big pushback from regulators now isn't on blockchain.
Yeah.
It's more of the pushback on, I guess, gambling and crypto at the moment.
Yeah. I think when it comes to, I think in the long-term cryptos here, right? I was talking to a guy from the Mint a while ago, and I said, do you have any doubt that 50 years from now, all money will be electronic? And if it's electronic, won't it have to have some crypto protection? And he was like, well, yeah, of course. His partner, who was with him at that point, said, no, it'll still be green and we will still be unable to stop printing the damn stuff. But inevitably, that's the way it's going. But the guys who are in charge of thinking about currency policy, this is a really scary thing for them. So they're going to push back. They're going to try to manage it within an existing paradigm. But it's changing, and they've got to accept it. And eventually, as other countries begin to adopt this sort of race to Web3 and begin to take advantage of these innovations, then the US is going to have to catch up.
Yep, that's when the paradigm will change.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you guys are obviously full on Ethereum, do you see like it eventually being able to be this public cryptocurrency that sort of works with governments, or do you see, governments sort of forcing people onto their own chains and their own, centralized currencies?
I think they're not going to walk away from the centralized currencies. Who knows what's going to happen in this industry as we're going forward. I think Ethereum is going to be part of the answer to that story. What part it will play, I don't know. But, again, I go back to this international competition. There's a paradoxically centralized view of blockchain, which could come out of China. The Chinese government could say, we are adopting the distributed and decentralized nature of blockchain and of currency on that, but we are controlling it. We are the validators for transactions. There might be widely distributed validators, but they will only be our folks that are coming there. We will maintain these records. They're really sort of approaching it as a sort of cyber defense system, almost at that point, and as a way of control. And you can imagine then that becoming something like the operating system for supply chains running along the Belt and Road Initiative, right? Taking something from Mombasa and taking that all the way to Shanghai and being able to track every piece down the chain, collect that data, and manage that data within a relatively centralized governance system within a distributed and decentralized, physically decentralized system overall. Now, in that case, that's not what we want to see. That's not the vision that we're seeing of how, blockchain can work, but it's quite feasible to think that could happen. And if they do that, you can see, countries will begin to respond in a similar way.
Well, I mean, maybe you saw recently, wasn't it Vladimir Putin who said they're going to buy $10 billion worth of Bitcoin to get around capital controls? Yeah.
And there'll be this constant back and forth. And, we don't know what the paradigm is finally going to be.
Right. Yeah. No, I think, it's going to definitely be tough to sort of see whether or not they kind of let go of control. Because, I think that was one of the libertarian arguments from the get-go, was that you're going to have these, the government can't keep control. Like, governments inherently always fail. So people will eventually move towards the public networks. I don't know, do you sort of subscribe to that viewpoint? I don't know.
Whether I subscribe to it, it would be nice to think that that's how it's going to happen. But I think ultimately, states are not going to go quietly when it comes to this. And they're going to adapt this technology to their own needs. There will be stores of value outside existing currency systems. But governments have a lot going for them in their ability to control and manage exchange. And I think that, we're seeing that played out on sort of almost every day when it comes to the euro. Once you're in a system, it's very difficult to get out of a system. Once you've committed to it, the network effects. But in the case of government, of course, this is backed up by law and ultimately by the coercive power of the state.
Right.
Why is the US dollar why is it so supreme? Well, ultimately the Seventh Fleet. And a large amount of nuclear weapons back it up, so there's that to consider.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the big sort of, a lot of people think is the sort of the revolutionary piece about blockchain, especially these public blockchains, is that you sort of have, governance and governments without physical force.
Yeah.
Which is this, whole new concept for, I guess, organizing a system. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, the question is, does that system that we're talking about there, the ability to achieve governance without those coercive apparatus, really depend on the existence of a relatively stable, peaceful international system? you know. Now, at one extreme, you can say, well, if we had, you know, terrible instability and war, then you'd want something that was away from governments that you could trust, that wasn't set up around a particular government's authority. But as you move into a more stable system, you know, you go through this period where there's, from great instability, you move into a central period where you have more stability and paradoxically more trust then within a currency, within a government currency, because you're coming out of that instability. And then you go to this very peaceful long period. We've had the long peace that we've lived in really since really the fall of the Berlin Wall, where capital, to some extent labor, information can flow relatively freely. And in that, you can afford to experiment with these things because you're fairly sure no one's going to come and take your money. No one's going to interrupt your internet service when it comes to dealing with crypto. So we're in a period really that I would posit that utopian libertarian thing is almost premised on the existence of a sort of stable global world where governments exist to keep to keep order globally.
So would the ultimate irony be if crypto then destabilizes all those governments?
Exactly.
And just sort of kills itself from that mere fact alone.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for us hideous globalists, you know, we're sort of looking for, you know, we would like a global one world. You know, we would like bound borders to go away. And we would like the free exchange of labor and capital and all culture and all of this great stuff. And to do that, you really need the coercive power of these states, you know, to stand in the way and stop the bad guys going on. You know, one thing I often say is the existence of global US naval hegemony makes commerce across the oceans free and safe. You know, when you don't have that, you have pirates. You have countries extending their limits to say that they will tax this area. I mean, what are pirates but unregistered sovereigns trying to tax you for crossing their area? You have disrupted commerce, but initially, you know, Britain and then later the US has created this system where you can move goods across any part of the world and you can be really sure they get there at the other end. And that's a major achievement to do that. Now, we like, you know, us folks would like to expand that to digital goods and payments and all of that. So there's a question of how much you can detach these things from states.
Well, I think the bigger question too would be, you know, like right now, I guess all the states sort of come with the idea of, you know, a currency that you sort of get seignorage from, and you know, and can that be detached is the big question.
Yeah, well, you know, you look at the euro and why did people join? You know, now to some extent, again, it was the commercial entity that was coming there. It was a realization of the need to strengthen Europe. And for the poorer countries, it was a way to access German credit, you know, to get the same.
Just be honest about it.
As they were. But countries were willing to give up a high degree of sovereignty. So, you know, it's not impossible that these things come. The US is a very anomalous country because it rose to this incredible, you know, point of world power. And it's been very resistant about working into these. But it's not going to be there forever. And one hopes that things will change. Now, I would say to US policymakers, get ahead of this before someone else designs it for you, because that will happen. I mean, if you go back to, you know, the decline of the pound as an international currency and the emergence of the dollar, I mean, this really happened over a 50-year period, you know, starting with the Great War in 1914 and ending up probably in the mid-60s with the devaluation of the pound under Harold Wilson's administration. But you know, it was a long period by which that transition made, and at repeated points, the British tried to influence the new system, you know, culminating in Bretton Woods and these kind of things. It's those kind of things that the United States has got to engage in now, because the current position, the current dominant position, will not last forever. Nothing lasts forever.
Right.
But we know the world is changing, so we need to participate.
It'll be like the libertarian nightmare. We'll have like Bretton Woods, you know, again, and this time Bitcoin will take over or something.
Or something, you know, some as yet unknown currency will emerge, you know? I mean, you know.
Should I feel bad that I don't know what Bretton Woods is?
Yes.
Yes. So
someone else listening doesn't know either.
1945, the world is in ruins. Essentially, nobody can trade. You know, the world trade collapsed in the Depression, and the old system had been based on on gold. Essentially, all currencies were pegged to gold. Before 1914, you could even go to a school textbook and look up how many ounces of gold for $1, how many ounces of gold for £1, and those things never changed. You know, you could print a textbook and still be teaching it 10 years later from that textbook, and you were fairly sure they would be there. Now, after the crash in the 30s, and then after the war, essentially, there was only one currency left that was convertible to gold, which was the US dollar. US dollar had pretty much all the gold that was left in the world. You know, the European currencies had ceased to exist. The British currency was tremendous problems. So a meeting was held at Bretton Woods up in New Hampshire, where all of the United Nations powers, that is the Allies, got together and threshed out what would be the new monetary system. And the bottom line from that was that the dollar would become the international currency. The dollar would be backed by gold. And there would be certain things like the IMF and the World Bank coming out of that to be able to support countries that had balance of payments problems. It was great, went on, lasted to the early 70s when Nixon went off gold, and when you started to have floating currencies. The main reason for that was, as the rest of the world revived, US dollars outflowed. As they outflowed, the United States was losing control of its currency, the vast euro-dollar balances, and also gold was moving around, and the relative balance of those wasn't there anymore. At a simple level, the United States dollar couldn't buy as much gold as it used to in people's minds. And when you had those imbalances coming up that, you know, were many and complicated, the dollar was inflating because of Vietnam, you know, and the spending that was going on to finance both the Great Society and the war, you had to do something. And finally, Nixon went off gold, followed a system that was patched up together, and it's kind of the system we live in nowadays.
And I mean, so what would be...
Thank you for the history lesson.
Yeah, I mean,
not making me feel terrible, Nick.
Yeah.
And I tell you, I've been to Bretton Woods for a conference, for a blockchain conference, in fact. And it's a fantastic place. It really is. It's the room that the treaty was signed in, they just have all cordoned off, and you can go in and take photographs of yourself there.
Cool.
Yeah.
And that, I don't think we've mentioned, so I'm guessing from your accent, you're British?
I'm British, yeah. So I came over here about 20 years ago, and
Okay.
I've been back and forth over time, but basically here.
So, you know, I guess we can talk very topical, you know, what can we learn about maybe the euro failure to keep in Britain, I guess, in setting up this new global...
Sure. Well, the biggest, you know, I mean, the first thing was Britain didn't join the euro. And Britain didn't join the euro because Britain, you know, wanted to keep control of its economy. What Gordon Brown, the then Chancellor, said when there was a push towards joining the euro was that you couldn't have a common monetary authority unless you had a common political authority. In other words, if Germans treated Greeks in the same way as they treated other Germans, then you could have a common currency. For the simple reason that if all of these countries were going to set their own fiscal policy, then they were going to be inflating and deflating their economy through their fiscal policy, but the monetary policy was going to be detached from that. And it just wouldn't work over time. You know, you would have the situation in Greece where Greece is having to reach certain targets to be able to maintain the agreements it made when it joined the currency. But there's no assistance from the central government, because there is no central government, to help Greece be able to manage those problems. So, for instance, it would be like, you know, Mississippi is a very poor state, and so there are injections from the federal government to come in to help Mississippi go along and to survive as a state. It would be like if Mississippi, suddenly we said to it, we're not giving you any federal dollars or anything, any investment from the federal government, but you have to use the dollar. And to use the dollar, you've got to meet certain requirements. And Mississippi would say, well, we can't meet those requirements. We've got to raise tax levels to a huge amount, or, you know, we've got to destroy our economy to do this. And we said, you know, too bad. So Europe never achieved that political settlement. Now, when you come to someone like Britain, you know, they said, no, we think of ourselves the fifth wealthiest country in the world, fifth largest economy. We're going to stay out of this. We want to still be able to control a chunk of our money. So we'll remain in the European Union for purposes of trade, for free mobility of labor, for political coordination, and all of this, but we will not join the euro. And really what Britain and other countries around the world have experienced is, as the economy has changed, is you know, we're talking about this with blockchain, and we're part of that elite that's doing well out of the technology. You've ended up, the fourth industrial revolution technology, you've ended up with a large group of people who are excluded from the benefits of that technology. And when it came to Brexit, they voted to get out, and they're angry. People are angry. They're angry at the wrong things, just like the folks that vote for Trump. I mean, the area I come from in Britain is in South Wales, and it's in Britain there's this thing, the index of deprivation, where they combine unemployment, poverty, teen pregnancy, drug addiction, all of the worst things you can think of, into a single index. And the town that I come from, a place called Blaina Gwent, has the highest score of the index of deprivation.
Congrats.
I know, we're very proud of it. As you come into town, Blaina, highest. Shittiest place to live in the United Kingdom, mainland only. But we're after you, Northern Ireland. So what did people do there? They voted overwhelmingly to leave the EU. And when I was talking to a cab driver the last time I was there, I said, why did you do this? He said, one, he doesn't like foreigners. And there were bloody Poles coming in here all the time, which I kind of took to be, that's incredible. Poles are coming here. That's a real vote of confidence in this place. Secondly, he said they're taking our money. Of course, ignoring the fact there is huge EU investment in the town, you know, from the Economic and Social Fund, and a big EU investment building has gone up there too, and all of this, you know. And his third thing was, those buggers in London are doing well out of this, and they want it. And if they want it, fuck them. You know, so it's that reaction to that sort of globalist elite. You go to London, it's an international city, it's booming. Down here, it's not.
Sure.
So you have that. So the reaction in Britain has been a combination of that, of I don't like foreigners. I think, you know, where is our money going? Again, going back to the transparency we talked about, and putting the finger up to London. on the working class side, it's that, and then on the sort of the political elite thing, you've still got a lot of people that think Britain is this imperial power. You know, surely they can't do without us. You know, the French will be begging us to stay in, and all of this nonsense. So you see a lot of that, and that's where we are now. Now, you know, would some sort of, you know, global crypto be a good idea? Yes, but when you deal with it, you're going to have to deal with those issues that the Euros dealt with, like those things there. There are going to be winners and losers out of any system we pick. And some of those winners will be big winners, make a lot of money. And other people will be big losers. And the losers will do what they can to frustrate it. And that might be voting for politicians that block it, or that might be, you know, other ways of doing that, you know, protests, or, you know, even violence, who knows? So you're going to have winners and losers as you move into this. Now, right now, where crypto is, we can exist as a small part of the global system. But as these issues start to come, it's not going to be governments coming down and slapping down crypto. Eventually, governments will join because you have sensible people. It's going to be people who are the losers in that.
It's going to be South Wales.
It's going to be South Wales. It's going to be Appalachia, right?
Well, I mean, that's the... So do you think those will be maybe the losers? Or, you know, some people have said, like, the whole purpose of, you know, the one thing crypto might do is somehow displace all of these intermediaries.
Might be. But, you know, I'm sure a lot of travel agents do not think kindly about Expedia and Orbitz and all of that. You know, that whenever there is technological change, there are winners and losers. You know, the assumption is that in the long run, the winners outnumber the losers, but it can be very painful for the losers in the short run. And, you know, Tucker Carlson, the Dion of Fox News, was on his show the other night saying, you know, we need to accept that global capitalism has not been good for many people. And
do you watch Tucker Carlson on a regular basis, or?
No, but I heard people doing it, and then I wanted to watch him. But he was basically going on. He said, you know, if I was Tsar, the thing that I would do is ban self-driving cars and trucks, because it's going to put out of work hundreds of truck drivers, of the salt of the earth, you know, family men who are supporting that. You know, that's really, I mean, there are winners and losers. He's saying, and then many other people say, we should stop progress in certain ways. There will be winners and losers for cryptocurrency. If we expand, if we grow, if we become the dominant method of exchange, or if more and more people do it, there will be some people that lose. The intermediaries, which we think, hey, great, those people aren't going to enjoy it. Some of them will go off.
Think of their families.
Go ahead.
No, I was saying, like, you know, people are going to say, think of their families, you know, because losers all have families, and it's a sad truth that if they're to be winners, there have to be losers.
Yeah, but I would say one thing, that if you think about this, when it comes to the public have migrated en masse to lower cost options, to economically advantageous options. You know, we all moved from having travel agents to going online and booking our own trips. And we did it without a moment's thought about the travel agent. And travel agents tried to do things to get us to come back, but we said, no, you know, it just makes so much sense to do it this way. Most of us now, or a great many of us, are starting to think about this, about brick and mortar shops. You know, if I have to go to a physical shop, I am disgusted, you know, that I can't go online and buy something. You know, what am I, a filthy animal living in a cave? I mean, what do you mean I can't order this online? There's a lot of people in retail that are, you know, that aren't going to feel good about that. And all of the supply chains that back those up. You know, over Christmas, I went to see a movie in a mall, and it was a horrible experience. Why am I here? Who are all these people that still go to malls? What is going on?
Paying $20 for popcorn and
yeah. So it was, why can't I watch this at home? Why can't I remain entombed in my house and never leave it? But there are going to be these changes, and it's going to hurt. But we just migrate to these more simple solutions. So, and I think that goes back to what is going to take crypto to really take off. It's going to be that killer app, right? It's going to be that thing where people say, I don't need the technology to be explained to me. I get it. When I'm sort of giving my pitch and we come into the whole thing of somebody says, well, explain blockchain to me. I say, do you know how the internet works? And they say, no. I say, no, me neither. I have no idea how switching stations work and how packets are exchanged and why one thing works and something else doesn't. I don't know how the lights work. I turn a switch and power comes. However, I am so convinced by the utility of the electric light bulb that I don't need it explained. And similarly with the internet, I am so convinced by the obvious benefits of it, for commerce, for communication, all of this, that I don't question it. Right now, we're at the stage where the benefits of crypto, where the benefits of blockchain are not immediately apparent. So we have to go into this thing where we explain the technology and where it's better than this. We still need that app. We still need that thing, whatever it is, that people look at it and say, oh yeah, that's it. Once we get that, people will migrate to it, and we won't hear anything about winners and losers. It will just happen.
And what do you think that is? Any guesses?
I have no idea.
You mean it's not Bitcoin?
But I really want to
invest
in it when you make it. Well, it might be something like Bitcoin. I used to, I still do. I have this T-shirt, and it says, blockchain. It's not just for sex trafficking, drugs, and guns anymore. And in a way, it was the killer app for illicit transactions. It was the killer app for when you live in a place and your currency is not good, But right. When you've got, it's difficult to explain to somebody when they've got Apple Pay on their phone that there's actually a superior way to transact that doesn't involve using the US dollar and having the middleman. Because right now people are prepared to pay for the middleman. And as long as they are effectively insured against data breaches, they're not really losing out that much. And it still remains an untested hypothesis that people will actually, for instance, prefer to manage their own data than have someone manage it for them. It's a stated and revealed preference issue. People's stated preferences, I want to control my own data. Their revealed preferences, I'll give it away as long as I can play Angry Birds. Yeah. As long as I'll give it to Facebook. I don't care. I want to talk to my niece.
And do you think the
who wants
success
to
of
have these plugged into their computer?
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, do you think the success of blockchain depends on sort of the people that actually want to hold their own data? Or...
See how many of them there are. I mean, human beings are lazy, right? We're effort-averse entities. We like to sit down and do as little as possible. It's built into our genes to do that. Those of us who wanted to get up and run around and do things constantly didn't make it through the famine. Those of us who sat in our asses and got fat when we could, we made it. I think there will have to be some, I hate to say it, almost an intermediary, someone to offer to manage that data for you, probably for a fee. When Facebook came out, there was no reason that it ended up being a free service that financed itself by sucking up your data. It could have been a paid-for service. We decided collectively we weren't prepared for a paid-for service. Might we be prepared for one if it gave you some control over your data? If it allowed you to sell certain data? Maybe, I don't know. Network effects are awfully hard to combat. Is there enough of us who care about controlling our data? I don't know. I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, people always say that about, controlling your healthcare data or things like this,
Yeah.
and it's scary because if you're controlling it, you can lose it.
Yeah, and also, do people really want it? I mean, I know the thing that always comes like, I want to see my health record, and how difficult is it to have my health record? But it's really quite easy if you ask for it. I mean, sure. and your doctor will actually tell you everything about yourself to an nth degree, to the degree to which you're honest with your doctor. And it's not so much that we lack the data, it's that we don't act on the data that is the issue. Whenever you talk to somebody, it's amazing how much they have chosen not to know that is easy to find out.
Right. It's like, you're not going to diet if we told you anyway.
Yeah. So, okay. So now I own my data and my genealogical data and all of this kind of stuff. And I can say this. And the argument is, well, someone's going to make a buck out of it. Well, I suppose you could argue if someone's going to make a buck out of it, it should be me, because it is my data. But the actual effort that I will expend to make that buck is questionable. It's going to have to be made very easy for me to make that buck. Paradoxically, I think it's going to take government regulation to shift the balance there to make you do that, such that somebody can come in and start to force you to pay attention to your data. I'm sorry, I have a cat who just appeared.
Oh, it's okay.
Perfect. The internet loves cats.
That's right. Now you finally got an audience.
Yep.
Yeah, so
Go away.
So I guess the next question would be, before blockchain adoption, I know some issues that maybe Consensys is definitely helping with, or is I guess just scaling these things. We're never going to see.
Technology isn't there yet, It's just not there.
When do you think it will be there? It's still the big debate.
I think by about 2020. I mean, looking at the Ethereum roadmap, I think we're getting there. I think new things are coming out all the time. I know we're very bullish that we'll be able to sort of run those high-speed smart city applications by about 2020.
Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, so if it's by 2020, then I know Consensys right now is sort of just setting it up on more private servers then, and then you'll be shifting it over there. Do you think that's...
Well, that's our hope, that it will be in a position where people will start to accept that. I mean, a lot of the things when it comes to the more private things, we're just appealing to the way the business is going right now. People are interested in enterprise applications. So we're moving, to follow the market. We still think that the OpenNet has huge advantages, especially in giving you security and validating that. And we feel that the difference between public and private is going to disappear. You're going, just as you have right now, walled gardens around particular enterprises who then take advantage of the internet for specific things. We think that the Web3 that emerges, people will be taking advantage of that to validate, to store data, and it will be less important to them as they get used to the technology and as the technology improves.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's super cool. I guess to kind of like wrap up as we close up on an hour, like what can we do to set ourselves up for success in this new world of blockchain? And, like, how can people prepare for it, or, don't become one of the losers, I guess, as you said.
Yeah, that's right. Because, I've lost out on so many boom markets in the past. Yeah, I managed to run my own .com company into the ground in 2099. And I keep saying, no, I'm not going to do that again. So what can you do? Well, you need to get smart. You need to listen to podcasts like this, right? You need to be aware of what's going on throughout everything. You can't just be sitting out there on the outside looking in. So you got to get smart. You got to listen. You got to go to meetups. You got to get online. You got to read. You got to listen to podcasts. You got to get educated.
And study your history.
Study your history. Then you got to participate. You got to do something. You know, if you're in an organization, you got to do a pilot. You got to do a POC. You got to test. The best way to learn is to do. You know, you got to buy some cryptocurrency. See if you can spend it. See what it's like. You know, learn something about those markets, but physically doing something, there's no substitute for that. Because that's when ideas start to spark in your head. That's when you start to say, wait a minute, if we could do this, then we can do this. And especially younger people coming in and starting to think about how the applications can change in their life. So by coming engaged, not just learning and not just being part of, but doing. You know, I'm a big believer in you understand the world by interacting with it, by physically touching it. You know, you try and write some code, even if you're not a code person, you begin to see the challenges that are involved. You begin to see what it can and can't do. You go and say, hey, I've got an idea to do X, Y, Z. I'm going to put dogs on the blockchain. I've got this idea that I can stamp out puppy mills. That really matters to me. So it's only going to be rescue dogs that are on here. And I can guarantee this dog didn't come from a puppy mill and all of that. If you're going to do that, then go and find someone that can write code and talk about what it is that's going on there. And I'm only going to pay for these dogs in a native currency. And then I'm going to sort of tie it up to pet food suppliers and all of this. And I'm going to get these guys on. I'm going to make sure that it's humanitarian grown animals that are putting into the dog food and all of this kind of stuff. Okay, start working with people, figuring out there's nothing to stop you doing this. You know? That's how Americans in particular feel terrible when they're on the outside of a boom, you know, and they're looking in. We've gone through the first crypto boom. Yeah, that was fun. It was a bit of a roller coaster. This hasn't ended yet. This has barely begun. And to get involved now, to set yourself up to be one of the winners of the future, that's the way to go. Because this is the future. This is the rest of your life. Now, if you're an old fart like me, you know, I'm going to be dead in 10 years, so that's okay. You know, I don't need to worry about this. But if I'm young like you guys, man, I got 60 to 80 years ahead of me, probably with life extension. I'm going to be stuck around here for another 100. You might as well take some risks now and do some stuff. Puppy Chain is out there waiting.
Yes. I need to slow clap this.
Yeah. All right, guys. It's been great talking to you.
No, that was amazing. No.
It was good. Tori, thank you so much. So we will hopefully see you at one of the events in DC.
Yeah.
I'm always around. All right, look after yourselves.
All right, talk to you later.
All right, bye.
Bye.